I talked to a provider the other day who did this surgical procedure that it's not like an easy procedure. And he's like, I just looked at my reimbursement. I got $527 for that surgery. I mean, it's an insurance. I think that the system's broken in this country, obviously. Mm-hmm. Insurance runs the world and decides the value of a procedure or a service. And I think in many cases, unfortunately, the providers are the ones that are suffering. And that's why we see these independent practices becoming so much of a need. So I would say back when I started working with providers and helping them, it wasn't the norm. And I would say it's becoming more and more the norm where physicians are saying, how can I work and make the money I'm worth?
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. Whether you're a medical professional or entrepreneur, today's guest is the greatest guide and even accountability partner you could have if you're considering opening a cash medical practice. Having started, scaled, and sold her own practices, she's firsthand experience and has helped numerous clients grow their own practices. And what I love about today's conversation is I get to dive into this cash versus insurance world from the outside and understand what's driving this stuff. And also, we're going to talk about real estate. How do we put together this pro forma or this process to let me understand, do I buy? Do I rent? Do I build? How am I supposed to know all of this as a medical professional? Today's conversation, we're going to touch on all of these notes. And the founder of buildyourcashmedicalpractice.com, everybody please welcome Jessica Jones to the show. Jessica, welcome to the show. Now, before we got on here, you telling me that you've prepared for hours and hours and hours and had to practice and rehearse to get ready for this show, right?
Everything is very scripted.
Yes. No, not at all. This is going to, and to all the guests prior to going live here, we always talk about if there's a direction that we wanted to hit, but honestly, these have always been just free-flowing conversations, right? So we're just getting ready. We're going to have this nice free-flowing conversation on what's going on. But hey, this is simple. You've got a very cool thing that you're doing. And I just wanted to relate that and kind of bring out the questions related to real estate along this process as well, too. So let's get started, Jessica. Tell the listeners just a little bit about Jessica Jones.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a medical practice consultant. People often say to me, well, what does that mean? I'm a one-on-one consultant. I'm not a systems, I'm not like, you're going to follow this system. I meet you where you are and help you grow your practice, grow your revenue streams, fix issues in your practice. It's whatever challenges you're facing. I help you in many cases figure out what that is. And then we work on overcoming it. And I also help providers move from being in a system that's making them unhappy into their own practice. And, frequently entrepreneurs as well contact me to learn how to start a medical practice and partner with a medical practitioner to do so.
So how did you get into medical practice? Are you a medical professional? Are you a physician?
Yeah, no. So my background from the early 90s till 2008 was marketing. I was working for a national marketing company, overseeing a region from Philadelphia from New York to Richmond, Virginia. I'm located in Philadelphia. And part of that was working with a lot of political agencies in DC and a lot of pharmaceutical companies in and around the Philadelphia area. In 2008, that company went Chapter 7, and, I was very lucky immediately. The pharmaceutical companies were still requesting for my help to help them fill difficult clinical studies. And in doing so, even though you're working with the pharmaceutical company, you're working one-on-one with each study site and the study director. And so doctors started referring me to doctors because I got a reputation for helping people overcome challenges and grow. Like, it's not that there's not leads. What is it that's preventing you from enrolling in this study? And so, and then I continuously was helping practices go from struggling to growth. And then in 2012, one of the doctors said to me, "Hey, I have the medical side. You have the business side. You've done a great job for me with this practice group. Would you join me in my next venture and be my partner?" So then he and I grew a chain of 15 clinics from 2012 to 2015. We sold those in 2015. And then I started my own 6 practices, one at a time, by the way. Mm-hmm. I didn't just say, "Oh, let's open 6 locations," one at a time. And these are cash-based. So it's much quicker when it's cash-based than if you have to credential. And so in 2017, I said, I never sought to own my own medical practices, but I really love helping people with theirs. And so since 2017, I sold my last medical clinic and have been consulting ever since.
Interesting. So many questions I have for you. For one of them is, you're not a physician, you start a medical clinic. Who's the first person you hire?
Oh, well, first I have to work with a medical director. Okay. So I either, if it's a full practice authority state, it can be a nurse practitioner. If it's not a full practice authority state, it's a physician. And so first I have a physician partner. Interesting.
And how did you go about finding that relationship, or did you have those relationships already?
So for me, when I was starting my own clinics, I had those relationships already. And now I have practitioners licensed in every state. So, I actually do help people partner with medical direction. It's a frequent thing that I do.
And this cash-based thing, just tell me, you said that it almost sounded like the setup or the startup could start a little quicker going cash-based versus insurance-based. Did I hear that right?
It is. So, not to get too complicated, but of course, if you're a medical provider who's already credentialed with Medicare, Medicaid, and private pays, there's no issue because you can bring providers on underneath you and supervise them under your credentialing until they're credentialed. But if you're not credentialed, the credentialing process can take 60 days. So it's just a hold up to the speed of opening up and starting your business. Or, for example, I'm helping a physician right now in California who's bringing staff on underneath him for a big Medi-Cal project that he's doing with the state. And so what we're finding is only 30% of the patients that come on board are under his credentialing. So a complexity when you're dealing in the insurance world is, one, you can only supervise providers underneath you to see a capped number of patients a day. So you need those providers to be credentialed. Another limitation is some panels are closed. So there's panels that you may not be able to get on to at all. So for example, right now for that project, there's a panel that's closed. And so we're searching for a provider credentialed within that panel to be a supervising provider, right? Because they won't add any new providers. And third is the time it takes to credential new providers. Even if a panel's open, it can take time, like I said, 60 days, sometimes 90 days to be added to a panel.
Interesting. And then not only kind of like a startup being a little bit easier on a cash based practice, but that cash cycle is also faster, correct? You're going to get that money faster.
Immediately. Exactly. Within 48 hours, usually. There's limitations to the cash-based world as well. If you're a provider seeking to start a cash-based practice, there's definitely legalities because you need to make sure that you can do a cash-based service if you're particularly if you're credentialed with Medicare, because if you give up your Medicare credentialing, you're giving it up for 7 years. You can't get back on a Medicare panel for 7 years if you give up that credentialing, right? And so providers starting a cash-based business are always very concerned about giving up their credentialing. So it's just knowing what is covered so that you're staying out of anything that is a conflict that you're charging a cash-based service for.
Juggling three balls while jumping through a hoop and running hurdles at the same time. It sounds like could be complicated. And then the whole macro perspective of the insurance world, the political world. Yes. Wow, what a juggling thing. But what I want to talk about is the real estate side of this. So when and where and how do your clients start talking about, am I renting space? Am I building? I've got this space. Do I buy? Well, how does all that work out?
I mean, usually providers outside of a certain subset of providers aren't even thinking about buying the space, right? The exception to that for what I believe chiropractors tend to be more entrepreneurial and have for a long time been told the secret to wealth is buying the building, renting out the other space to others. Your rent is covered by all your lessees. And at the end of the day, you've got this building that you own and can sell, and it's a great asset. Chiropractors. I find a lot of chiropractors own that, not all, but a lot own their space. But I mean, really long ago, people were focusing on that space as hey, if you're a chiropractor, here's a great way to get asset-based wealth that's passive, right? Some veterinarians also get that piece, but I'm sure there's other areas, but those are the two that I frequently come across that get the real estate aspect.
Interesting. So as a chiropractor, I'm just trying to figure out, okay, when and where is this happening and why? But as far as what other types of practices have you worked with?
When and where and why, I can tell you those answers because in most medical education, it is beaten into the provider that you don't think about money, you think about patient care, right? But in the chiropractic space, some of the schools literally focus on being a business owner. So they add that piece to it and they add wealth building and planning into the curriculum. It's a unique, and then there's big, large marketing groups that found a need in that area, specifically chiropractic, and they targeted chiropractors and said, hey, we've got great ideas for you. And I don't know, I think it might have been maybe like 2010 or 2011, there was a chiropractor who wrote a book to the community about like breaking the chains. And it was all about using real estate and starting with ownership of your building. And then as you do well, scaling up the real estate side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now I would think other practitioners are getting into it because they're listening to your podcast and they're saying, oh, wait a minute, I never thought about this.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting what you said about kind of like being instilled in the medical practice world of you're not worried about money, you're worried about the patient, which there's got to be some sort of juggling act here, this in between, because now what we're seeing happen is, okay, you're talking about building a practice and selling it. Well, on the other end of that, there's these companies, these funds, these investors that are buying these things and basically turning the physicians back into W-2 robots.
Yeah, the private equity.
So that idea is beating the physicians backwards when it comes down to it.
Well, it's not only that. It's, I talked to a provider the other day who did this surgical procedure that it's not like an easy procedure. And he's like, I just looked at my reimbursement. I got $527 for that surgery. I mean, it's an insurance. I think that the system's broken in this country. Obviously, insurance runs the world and decides the value of a procedure or a service. And I think in many cases, unfortunately, the providers are the ones that are suffering. And that's why we see these independent practices becoming so much of a need. So I would say back when I started working with providers and helping them, it wasn't the norm. And I would say it's becoming more and more the norm where physicians are saying, how can I work and make the money I'm worth and not be reliant on the insurance-based system? Make sense?
No, it doesn't make sense. And that's the problem.
Well, no, it doesn't make
that's
sense.
Exactly the problem.
But you see where it's coming from. That's the root cause. How's that?
Yeah. And
patients, by the way, are feeling the same way. Like, I can't get what I want through my insurance company. Not what I want. I can't get what I need through my insurance company. Mm-hmm. And so they're seeking providers outside of their insurance network as well. So.
And I've, being self-employed, being an entrepreneur, and I've made this journey from the other side of the exam room, being that I'm the patient walking in and not having insurance, and how different I feel. I always felt like I was, being pointed at or laughed at. But then I'm learning that on the other side, they're just as uncomfortable about it as well, too, because of people's reactions and responses when it comes to billing. And there's just this unknown. But what it does come down to is the challenges that we have currently with the insurance world. And you said it perfectly. Like they run the world. They decide what things are cost, because being from the outside, I don't know any of this stuff. But when you go to bill an insurance company, they have the economies of scale where they can basically weigh you down, wear you down, tell you what they're going to pay, and you keep finally, okay, I'll take that, or however it may be. Where if I come in as cash, you're going to say, okay, hey, Brett, here's your bill, and then boom, I pay you. So there should be some sort of leveling or evening out on this, because how much administrative time and cost and opportunity cost is lost. We're talking about not worrying about money, but worry about the patient. What if I have to worry about getting my money because I am worried about the patient? There should be this flip around. Something's got to happen. Something's messed up with that. But back.
We need more podcasts like this to bring it to light, because I really think, I recently had a gathering of a large group of family and friends. And, at the end of the day, everybody's talking about, well, what are you doing today? What are you up to now? And catching up. And you start to talk to people and you think this is common knowledge, and you don't realize how few people understand the conundrum of insurance and practitioner, being a provider and private pays. And so many people blame the doctors, right? And that's actually the only reason it came up, because I really wasn't in the place and space to feel like talking about what I'm doing, but somebody was complaining about where they live and how long they need to wait for a provider. And their CAT scan was turned down and the doctor didn't do the paperwork right. And I'm like, oh, it's, the doctor's taking the blame here, but this is the reality. And it became a discussion, and they said, oh, well, more people need to know about this. And I said, to be honest with you, I didn't realize it wasn't common knowledge. I mean, this is a systemic problem, and this is every state's individual, it's state to state. There's no, even Medicare, it's a state to state rules and regulations, right? And so
one of the challenges too is from the outside. Again, I love having the opportunity to have this podcast and speak in this room, because I'm the outsider talking with the insiders, right? Yeah. And so from the outside, Jessica, I'm only bumping up against this at some of the worst times in my life. And it's not a time where I want to learn anything or necessarily help somebody else past this point, because I'm struggling. If we were in a car accident, it's probably a year or two ago, and it was horrendous. It was a horrendous accident. We're all here by the grace of God. Thank God for that. But through that process, it was horrendous. The car, ultimately, the medical the auto insurance took care of us. But I had the medical places like threatening to charge for me for not paying my bills. But then the insurance company is telling me not to pay my bills, telling me that it's gonna go on my credit and all this stuff. And I'm just like, oh my goodness,
right.
How
and it's
many
the last
different
thing. As a patient, you're suffering, and it's the last thing you need is that added stress.
Yep.
And talk about stress. Just look at mental health in our country. If anything shows how broken insurance and the medical provider relationship is, it's mental health.
Mhm.
You cannot get good coverage for mental health concerns. Even, somebody's put into an addiction center. Well, there's a 30-day cap on treatment, but we know it takes longer than 30 days to break addiction. So what do? We put them in a care facility for 30 days. They come out. If they don't overdose from being detoxed right away, because now they're going out and they, you know, fall into old habits, but they go back to where they were and their body can't handle that much. If they don't fall into that trap, they are back in rehab at the soonest that insurance will allow it.
Mm-hmm.
Why not just look at it and say, okay, we know it takes this long to break addiction. Let's change the insurance system or let's change our insurance regulation to allow for the amount of time that it should take, instead of putting this person into a cyclical, permanent back and forth in and out of rehab.
Yeah.
Medicare, like everybody thinks, oh, Medicare, take advantage. Every state has free, paid for by Medicare itself. People who have to get certified to know all the Medicare programs and help you choose the right program. I can tell you right now, for example, if you have type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes and you're prone to get chronic wounds because of because of the diabetes and the impact on your overall circulation and everything else, there's definitely a better program for you in your state that you should know which one's going to cover your care based on what your conditions are. If you have MS, Parkinson's, chronic, if you have any type of chronic health issues, you want to make sure that you get on the best possible Medicare program for your needs.
And then what I was saying with my particular experience with inside of that, there were 4 or 5 different providers in my one trip to the hospital. There was 4 or 5 different, that means 4 or 5 different sets of bills, 4 or 5 different, insane. And then we'll talk about proactive versus reactive, what the insurance cover is going to be, a reactive versus proactive. Oh no, we can't do that. Holistic, no, we don't do any of that stuff. Exercise, I'm not paying for that. So there's lots of things that go into that. But if we go back, Jessica, just 1 second, from proactive and the reactive perspective, back to the real estate piece. When somebody's, obviously we're juggling all of this stuff when we start, hey, I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to start my own practice. So you've got all of this going on. And then in the background somewhere is this idea of renting versus buying versus building. We talked briefly about the chiropractors having this kind of angle. I think some dentists actually
you're right.
have that
dentists,
piece as well,
orthodontists, too. Absolutely.
Yeah. So in that world, what part are you able to help your clients with saying, how big of a space can I have? How much can I afford? How much do I need? Do I need room for growth? So what's that look like when you're working with your clients?
Yeah. So as it pertains to real estate, we look at location, we look at costs, we look at based on what the service is that they're going to be providing. Do they just need 1 exam room? Do they need 3 exam rooms? Do they, it really depends on what they're going to be providing. Can they not have a space and work via telehealth? It's really, that's very unique. Most of the practices I talk to can't even fathom buying the space. In fact, many of them use, there's companies out there that you pay a monthly fee to, and they cover your lease, right? So that if you go out of business for any amount of time, that's covered. And
it sounds like insurance to me.
I mean, it is an insurance program basically, but for some providers, it's really, the only way they can see doing it, because the landlords are, a little bit nervous as well. Right. And so it gives them a sense of, okay, I'm covered no matter what, because this is contractual and these people are willing to pay if the business goes under for any reason.
Interesting.
So
now, how about how much can I afford? Are you able to walk them through, especially on a new business? We got to run projections, and how many of these clients actually even know the language of business, the P&L and the balance sheet, enable them to say, hey, this is our accounts receivable. This would be, how does that work?
They don't. So if you're working with me as a startup, one of the first things we do is a pro forma, and we track all of your startup expenses. We look at what everything's going to cost. We look at what you're thinking of charging for a service. We look at, will the market bear that pricing for the service, right? And I never recommend people go to the bottom of the barrel on pricing. That's not, when I say what the market will bear, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what is the average price that people are paying for this service, and what added value can you put in there to make you worth more or make you the choice, right? And it can be expertise. It can be it's really, it's as individual as the medical services that are out there as to what you can put in or bring to the table. A lot of times it's as easy as expertise or the amount of time you're going to be spending with a patient, right? Yeah, because that's what, if somebody's looking for this concierge type of medicine, they want to have access to the care they need, and they want to know that they're getting all of those services that you talked about. They don't want to, you talk about reactive, and that is the situation right now in your basic healthcare. I mean, physicians by administrative purposes are often only allowed to bill for one problem in a visit. How many times do you go to the doctor for just one thing versus saying, well, I'm having this, and this, right?
Yeah. As a contractor, it's always while you're here, right? As a contractor, I go to somebody's house, maybe fixing this, and then, while you're here, can you look at this? Yes. Or can you look at this?
Exactly. Or you have a number of things going on that really are just one problem, but you've got to talk about multiple problems to get to, this could be the source, right? This could be the diagnosis.
So you
again, physicians are as frustrated as patients, and that's why they're seeking, business opportunities. You're here providing this great resource about real estate. I have physicians come to me. Their passion has been so deadened that they're thinking of doing anything other than practicing medicine. Yeah. And I say, no, we need you. We need you, and we need your expertise. We just need to reinstill your passion and have you focus on what you're passionate about.
Getting drowned out by all these other things. Sorry. But you're helping them too in your process, because just like we were talking about, there's these things, whether they're taught not to think about them or they're focusing more on their specific specialties. But here comes this business thing. And that's either you make money or you don't. That means you survive or you won't. That's the world. That's how it works. So you're helping the clients, you're running this pro forma, and you're saying, okay, this is what we could project for rent. Right. I mean, is that what you put in your pro forma? Your idea of what rent would cost? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in the pro forma, we're meeting and we're filling it in as the real costs get added in, but we're estimating, we're looking at how much space might you need. And then we're connecting with a real estate agent in the area and talking about what that's going to look like.
Yeah. I've actually connected with a couple of resources I'll share with you. It's on our website, the Physician Wealth Systems website too. It's where they specialize in buyer representation only, buyer or tenant representation only. And they specialize not only in that, but with medical practices specifically. So a couple resources that I'll share with you. They're on our website as well too. I think that would be a kind of a cool little thing to throw in there to increase that value, because then I'm not just going to, the commercial real estate person in the area that has no idea about coding a specific thing versus having this person run here, how my traffic's going to flow into the building. Like there's so much that goes into that, that I can't pick out this person to say, hey, give me this best thing. But
and do you need to be in a medical area? Do you need, some practitioners are better in, near a grocery store where there's a lot of foot traffic. It just depends on what your specialty is going to be.
Yep, absolutely. So that's another great thing. You're helping them through that process, whether it's rent or buy, getting it all put together. And then as I'm assuming that you're working through then the startup and through these, how long do you typically work with a client?
Well, I'm really lucky because, basically, if you're starting up with me, we're spending a lot of time together. And then as you scale, we start to spend less time together. And then our time together goes down and our contract changes. But I'm going to knock on wood that a lot of people stick with me and kind of keep me on retainer when they're no longer needing that every week, lot of time together. They're just, keeping me on like a, call me with problems type of thing.
Nice. And
so
then
that's lucky.
when a client or yourself, when you sell, you're looking at, there's a couple different ways of evaluating the practice in the real estate, whether the real estate is, a lot of the times, if the real estate is owned, I would think that it would go with the business a lot of the times. But we're looking at sometimes if they're selling, they want to retain that ownership of the building and rent to the buyer, because most often when they own this is when they're owning the real estate and there's multiple locations. I would think that comes down to who's the better negotiator, because that's a huge piece of the deal there. It's the whole McDonald's thing.
That's exactly right.
When you have we're going to talk about EBITDA, right? What in the world is EBITDA?
So if you say, I've spoken with businesses who don't know the term. I will tell you right now, so first things first, a lot of people don't find me when they are starting their business. They find me when they're in trouble and they're facing a challenge and they're trying to get through the challenge. But EBITDA, to put it in the easiest layman's terms, is what you're earning before all of the other expenses that come into your business. So like interest, taxes, and depreciation of your assets, right? I'm sure you can add to that and make it even better for your audience.
No, I appreciate it. So it sounds like to me, maybe it's the income that the practice is generating
before interest, taxes, depreciation of assets. So like
the expenses are coming out.
A lot of people don't understand depreciation of assets, right? They buy a computer and think, well, I can just write off this expense. Or they put their car into the business and think, I'm writing off this expense. No, it's an expense that's now depreciating on your return. And I am not a tax advisor or accountant or CPA or anything of that nature. I'm just a business person who deals with P&Ls. But I will tell you, so most people come to me when they have a challenge. So it could be, a lot of practices. And I've worked with dentists, chiropractors, a number of different practice areas that have gotten into this thing where they've purchased equipment, right? A salesperson knocks on their door and says, it only takes 2 patients a month to pay for this device. Isn't it great? Blah, blah, blah. And they sign up for the equipment. And then only after signing the contract and bringing it on board realize, well, this is hurting my business. Mm-hmm. I'm not making money. I don't know how to market it. I'm not passionate about it. It doesn't fit with what I'm doing. And they're in trouble because they have this multi-year lease on this 6-figure equipment, right? And so I help them either figure out how to monetize it or figure out how to get it out of their business and refocus on what works. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people come to me when they're trying to figure out how to add a device and what's the right device. And that's great because we can really talk through it and prevent those types of mistakes. But the reason I bring it up is I specifically said, well, what do you have somebody doing your bookkeeping, and can you send me your P&L? And they, I have a bookkeeper, but I don't get it. They've never looked at their reports, mm-hmm. right? So P&L is always something I talk to every client about. If they have a bookkeeper and they're not getting the reports, I'm like, you either need to start getting those reports, ask your bookkeeper why you're not getting them, and bring on a new bookkeeper, because you should be getting monthly reports. because, you don't want at the end of the tax year, somebody to come to you with a list of questions. You're never going to remember in January what that expense was. That's what happens, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's every single time I do it with somebody who's been in business, they're like, wow, like this alone is unbelievable. I didn't realize, like I just had somebody, their rent isn't even on their reports.
So
and then they went back to the bookkeeper and they said, where's my rent? And it was miscategorized as like, I don't know how it was miscategorized, but it was miscategorized as a distribution to the owner. I'm like, how did your rent become
a distribution to the owner? So that's working the opposite way of what an expense should be doing. He doesn't own the building.
Exactly.
That bookkeeper should have been relieved of their duties, 100%. But
we're
if
just
you don't
working
know
through
this,
that. Yeah.
If you don't know this, Jessica, like that's why I tell everybody too, when I work with my clients in the real estate world, I want them to be, they need the fuel to fire the right questions. They don't need to know the professional, like you don't need a master's in finance to understand this.
That's why you hire people.
Yes. And if you've got to look at the P&Ls and you've got to be able to look at expenses. Then you can run them out on a T12, a trailing 12 and say, okay, we're at this time last year. I can see trends. I can see, hey, why did this jump way up this month? What are we doing here? And then trying to figure out, especially in the rental world, trying to figure out what an expense was or something for, let alone 30 days, but 3 months, a year, it's get out of here. Not happening. I have a question for you, Jessica.
Yeah.
As I started, again, I don't come from the medical world, but as I start working with colleagues and understanding like the idea of selling practices, and I'm seeing who's buying practices. I'm even seeing how practices are being kind of like grouped up and sold at a higher multiple of that EBITDA kind of world. Are we feeding the monster?
Are we feeding the monster? So, if you're looking at the impact of private equity coming in, unfortunately, I would say
you're trying not to say yes.
I would say probably because what I find is all of these providers entering into these relationships and ultimately ending up either being forced out or leaving because it's not what they believed it was going to be. There was a lot of things in the contract that they didn't understand from a business perspective what it would mean to the bottom line and their ability to collect on revenue. And the controls being taken away from them. They'd be better off if they want to get into their own practice or they want to, convert something to their own practice instead of getting into private equity. They should fund it in a different way, come together as a group of physicians and come up with the money so that they stay in control.
Yep. And the only thing, again, thinking about this recently is like, if there was a way to either find these other physicians that you could almost do like a seller finance kind of deal, coming from the real estate world, do like a owner finance kind of deal. So you're not getting those capital gains out front. I mean, there's other solutions to it. I just have to warn us collectively inside of this circle that we are feeding the monster when it comes down to it. And just like when the insurance stuff was right and it was working first, and then it continued to get fed and fed and fed. And where the money is, the control is. And just like what you said about the private equity, they have the money, they have the control, and you no longer do. And it's very rarely do I come across having a conversation with somebody who does sell and they, stick out for another year or 2 years or whatever after that. It's just a whole different world. If you
what I would say to you, first of all, I'm going to look. I might have a resource too for you that I'll share with you after our call together. I need to look at it. But I was just talking with somebody who, it has been in the financing side of things, who might be a resource for your clients. That's why I'm looking at it as a resource for mine. The thing about private equity, though, is so many practitioners want to have the ability to sell what they build. And so it's a mixed bag, right? Because there aren't a lot of people who can afford to buy a medical practice at a multiple. So providers are either walking away or selling their patient list for a small value.
Yeah, I can't even fathom the idea of walking away. It's like
a lot of people do. People
you've
walk
built this
away.
castle. You've built this huge castle, and there's like three blocks left, and then you can, convert that into something, something else that you can take and then just walk away. That's insane.
But we focus on, the fact is you can't sell your practice. First of all, if you're not building a sustainable practice,
build to sell.
You also need to focus on that the practice can't be you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which happens. And I've also seen physicians buy a practice and then find that they didn't have the contract the right way and they're really buying nothing, right? Because all the patients were loyal to this practitioner and leave when the business sells. So there's so much to look into, but the first thing I say is you've got to have your P&Ls in order because you can't even fathom selling your business if you don't know everything that's going on and where your money's coming in and where it's going out and where you've got all of the costs that are going into the business that won't be there if you're no longer the owner, right? Like what are you adding in? You're cleaning your car, your, cable, your subscriptions, all of these other, things.
The fun stuff, pay yourself first.
Yes.
If you could go back, I would say in the last 15 years doing this, what's the biggest mistake that you've seen related to real estate when it comes to the practice?
Related to real estate. Let me think about that. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit probably not what you expect. But the biggest thing related to real estate where I've seen mistakes are in markets where you've got a medical practice that's located in an area where the marketing is multi-state. So you're pulling people from, like, for example, you're located in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, but the media market is really Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, right? Because it's right across the bridge and that's where the population is. And it's just a big part of the marketing. So you're locating in this area and you're thinking this is the area I'm targeting, but you really can't target that area other than digitally with your practice because you're so close to Philadelphia, or you're putting yourself in North Jersey and your media market is really New York City, or Connecticut and your media market's really New York. So, I've seen a practice actually open in North Jersey and end up moving into New York City because they realized, well, this is stupid. I'm getting all these calls, but everybody's in New York and they don't want to come to New Jersey. And I'm spending all this money on leads that I'm not able to convert because I'm in New Jersey.
Wow.
And similar with Connecticut. And so it's just kind of, you also have to go in. If you're not marketing, you have no business, right? Because nobody knows about you. And so you have to also go into wherever you're going to be in the real estate aspect of things. And you need to think, how am I going to bring patients into this practice? What's around me that I can do boots on the ground marketing to? And aside from boots on the ground and social media and Google, how else am I going to market this practice? And if the answer is unclear to you, or if the answer is, oh, I've got to go to this market, then you need to think about where that market is versus where your real estate is. And how are people going to be being served information about your business, and how likely are they to travel to where you are based on where they're going to be located?
And surround yourself with the right people, because that's not something typically a medical professional is going to grasp or have the energy to learn. But learning the right questions, and even in marketing, just like in business, there's the P&L, which runs our KPIs or key performance indicators. When we're marketing, we need to know our key performance indicators as well too. Everybody out there listening to us today can find out more about this whole process, start to finish, at buildyourcashmedicalpractice.com. I will have it in our description. They can connect with you, learn more about you and your experience doing this, building them, selling them, working with other clients. There's so much value there. I'm also going to throw this on the resource page on Physician Wealth Systems as well too, because it's huge. It's crucial. We run into this all the time, and I know that you're just a huge asset to medical professionals out there. So thank you for your time today, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. Thank you. I'm really glad to connect, and I look forward to sharing more with you.
And it went exactly how we rehearsed and scripted this whole thing
Yes,
to
it's
the
all
T,
scripted.
the commas, the pauses, and everything.
knew?
Thank you so much. To the
Thank
listeners
you.
out there today, thank you for your attention. We always think that time is the biggest piece, but if you're not pairing your attention with your time, you're wasting your time. And I say this out there for you today, having the experience that I had with my family earlier today. Make sure you give your family that attention. Undivided attention. That's what we're here for, and that's what matters most. This is the Real Estate Mogul MD.